All right. So thank you for joining today's webinar on simplifying ETL and reducing costs. I'm Dustin Froyum, co-founder and CFO of VirtualZ Computing. I'm really pleased to have our chief architect, Richard Philyaw, here to present with me as well. This will be a fairly rapid-paced webinar to give time for questions and further discussion. Feel free to drop questions in the chat function you'll see in your toolbar above, and we will address those as we go, or we'll save them to the end depending on the context of the question, and then we'll open up microphones at the end for a Q&A and dialogue portion. Also, you'll see that this webinar is being recorded and available for replay later. While this webinar is fairly focused on ETL, Lozen has many other use cases. We'd welcome an opportunity to go deeper into Lozen's capabilities, other use cases, and our other product, ZAC, which stands for Z as a client, in a one-on-one briefing. We will review at the end of how to reach out to us, and so let's move on. We'll do a short agenda, and then we'll move right along. All right. So we're going to do just a very brief overview of the Lozen product and the ETL problem that we're solving here. Richard will speak about the Lozen, how Lozen fits in the ETL picture, supplements new or existing processes. We'll see a short demo of Lozen in action, and then we'll review some of the Lozen benefits and cost savings opportunities, and then we'll finish up with the Q&A that I referenced before. So this is probably a familiar picture to most people. Today, there's a chasm between the mainframe data and computing environments and the rest of the compute world. And so many of our customers have solved this in a variety of approaches out of necessity, so they can share their valuable business data from the mainframe with their other environments, such as data lakes, analytics platforms, custom and off-the-shelf cloud and distributed applications. Whatever the reason, we continuously hear about the demands that this puts on the customer's mainframes, consuming anywhere between 5 and a whopping 40% of general processing capacity and MIPS, and corresponding percentage of the hardware as well, right? So that takes further expense. So Lozen really provides a better and a more efficient low-cost solution that was just not available in the market previously. Therefore, we set out to solve this issue with the first real-time read-write access on non-mainframe platforms and applications, like a native mainframe in a no-code manner. This was accomplished from the release of Lozen in 2022 here. The resounding reception of Lozen in the market reinforces daily what an elegant solution, a cost-effective solution as well, that solves a real challenge. Now I'm going to turn it over to Richard, and he's going to talk about how this really fits into the ETL equation.
Yeah, thanks, Dustin. And thanks everyone for joining us today. So 3 major points I'd like to make. By leveraging Lozen on cloud or desktop systems, we can allow the use of familiar and usually less costly tools to access the data that's hosted on IBM Z. Lozen leverages NSF to mount IBM Z vSAM and sequential files in the local file system on Linux and Windows servers and desktops. All applications and processes running on those systems will access those files with standard file open, read, write, close commands. This can be as simple as a command line copy or an application file open to read the file. For more advanced access, you can leverage the Lozen API, which we'll talk to in the next slide, to support popular data integration tools. Portions of the ETL process can therefore be replaced by Lozen using these industry standard file access protocols and methods. Lozen runs as a server on the IBM Z mainframe, and we've embedded into that server the ability to transform the vSAM data or sequential file data as it's transferred to other systems. This is, of course, a really critical and important part of the ETL process, the transform part. And of course, that can happen either before or after the load part, so it could be ETL or ELT. But in our case, we can leverage, for instance, COBOL copybooks. Remember that VSAM data is in itself, if you just look at it, it's a byte stream. There's no metadata embedded with the VSAM file like there is in DB2 tables, for example. The structure is usually described by application programs written in COBOL or Assembler or PL1, typically on the mainframe. We can interpret those COBOL copybooks to apply the structure to the VSAM file as we transform it, so we can not only change the code page, transforming it from, say, EBCDIC to ASCII or Unicode, understand the data fields in the file that may be packed decimal, zone decimal, binary, datetime, and other formats that need to be transformed into a form that can be used on the cloud or desktop system. So we've embedded that into Lozen. You can also, by developing or leveraging existing processes, tools, and techniques in your cloud and desktop systems, you're reducing the reliance on typically scarce, more scarce these days, IBM Z expertise. So we're able to leverage familiar tools. We can do a strategic replacement of portions of the ETL process with a lower cost, more optimized for IBM Z. And I didn't mention, on the IBM Z platform, we are also a zip eligible workload. So that transformation process, for instance, that I described can occur in a cheaper processing context on the IBM Z. It doesn't have to apply only on IBM Z. We can also do the transform, for instance, on the desktop, by the way. So we're introducing efficiencies, reducing costs, and reducing reliance on expensive IBM Z resources and expertise. Okay, now let's move on to talk about the Lozen connectors and API. In addition to our native NFS and Micro Focus connectors, we also provide Open API and MuleSoft integrations, allowing Lozen customers to have simple and secure access to mainframe data from an increasing number of application environments. As you probably know, Open API is an open set of standards published by a consortium focused on the value of standardizing software APIs. Open API makes it easy to weave together services from a diverse range of providers into sophisticated composite applications. Many commercial and open source applications support the Open API specification. In addition to a wide range of open source tools, Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, TIBCO, Software AG, and many other vendors embrace Open API in their commercial products. And we're hearing from an increasing number of customers that they also are embracing Open API in their approach to API first data integration problems and data transfer problems. So that means that applications running within any of the contexts I just mentioned can use Lozen directly to read and update mainframe files by interacting with simple and familiar Open API objects without special customized coding. Now, I'll go on to talk about MuleSoft. This is an offering, of course, of Salesforce.com. It's one of the most popular integration platforms available with thousands of customers worldwide. While Mule can leverage the Lozen Open API capabilities described above, we also provide a specific connector that plugs into the MuleSoft Anypoint Studio that allows Mule workflows to be put together that include data transfer and data transformation from mainframe files to the target specified in the MuleSoft workflow. If you're developing applications outside the context of MuleSoft or other tools supporting Open API, our standalone API is also available that can be used to simplify accessing mainframe data. The Lozen API is available as a DLL format for Windows systems or a Java-friendly version that can run on multiple open systems. It ships as a simple jar file. So whichever approach you use, the API includes functions for opening and closing files, reading and writing data, and performing control functions like searching for records by key or record number. So at this point, we'd like to move on to a short demo showing some of the things we talked about.
Our demo environment consists of an IBM Z mainframe running ZOS connected via a TCP/IP network. In the first example, we will demonstrate accessing a VSAM key sequence dataset, or KSDS, from a commodity Linux x86 server. In our second example, we will show a similar scenario with a Windows system running the Lozen Microfocus COBOL integration. Let's quickly take a look at one of our test data files using the ZOS ISPF file manager. Here you can see we are looking at the vents.test KSDS file. We see 10 simple 80-byte test records with the key starting in position 0 and the data starting in position 9 for each record. Now let's move on to accessing this same data from a Linux shell so we can see how we've simplified all this complexity. The first thing we'll need to do is connect to our ZOS system. The connection is made using a familiar Linux command, mount. On the mount command, we specify that we want to use the NFS protocol. We also specify the name of our ZOS server and the location in the ZOS file system we want to access. Finally, we give a name to the mount point that we will refer to in our Linux shell. We execute the mount command, and that's it. We're now connected to our ZOS server. Now we can view the data in the VSAM file, again with a command line that is totally familiar to a Linux user. We use the cat command against a file name alias we defined with the external link command on ZOS that points to the same file we viewed using the ISPF file manager on ZOS as vents.test KSDS. If we reissue the same cat command line, we again see the same data, but something very important has just happened. Lozen and NFS cooperate to provide robust data caching at the client, with a quick call to the Lozen server to determine whether any of the data has changed since the last fetch. In this case, the records are retrieved directly from the local cache without incurring any additional network or ZOS file system I/O. Let's now move on to the final part of our demo. Here we see an unmodified microfocus sample program. The COBOL code declares an indexed file that it will access by key. The file contains information about airports. The program will retrieve 2 airport records and calculate and display the distance between them. Let's now build and execute the program. Here we see a dialog that prompts for the 2 airport codes displaying the calculated distance. Using the power and simplicity of Lozen, the program, without modification, has retrieved the 2 airport records from a mainframe VSAM file. We can directly access the single source of truth held in the mainframe VSAM file to obtain just the data we need without making any copies or extracts of the VSAM data.
All right, thank you. So Richard covered on some of the benefits and cost savings opportunities, but I was just going to summarize them here a little bit. So again, this is real-time read-write access in a no-code solution. And that's really important, right? We don't want the customer to have to write an API, a single line of code. So drastically reducing the cost and the maintenance of your ETL process. Even though some of the demo was looking at some specific records and airport types, you can be used to move the entire file if that's the process that you need, including to a data lake or something like that. As Richard also covered, this is all zip-enabled workload, so we've not seen anything below 90% of offloading of the data transmission and transformation moving to the zip engine, and we've seen as high as 98%. So that's a very significant savings opportunity. Now, you don't have to do it. You don't have to use a zip engine. It certainly will work under JVM on the mainframe, but that will certainly increase the savings opportunities of Lozen. Richard also touched on the bidirectional data transformation. This is really important. We can do this on either end, right? So that can be offloaded to the zip engine on the Lozen end, or we can do it on the distributed or cloud end as well through some of our connectors and APIs. One of the big things that we hear from customers is they don't want to move the data off the mainframe, or they want to maintain the security and the control to the data. And with Lozen, you really do enable that, and integrates with any of the mainframe security packages. The mainframe and infrastructure teams maintain that control, and you can use the native mainframe cryptography solutions as well. One thing that's also become pretty interesting for customers is on top of everything else being zip enabled, we just run 10% faster, both from an elapsed time and a resource consumption than FTP or SFTP. And so even if you're not using a zip engine to offload that work, you're still going to see some benefits of using Lozen to do some of that data transfer that was, being serviced by SFTP, plus the data transformation that's built in. And then we really want to have a very seamless, low friction barrier to entry. So our cost and licensing is very transparent. You can report out of Lozen on SMF records just how much data is moving through it. We do charge by data. If it's in the ETL situation, we'll have to take a look at how much data is being moved and give a custom price. But the reality is that we're seeing fractions of the cost of alternative solutions in the market. We've priced out some large customers, and they are averaging between $200,000 and $250,000 a year for their use cases. But again, we're looking to make sure that this is a self-funding solution for the customers. Okay. Let's move on to a little bit of Q&A. Elsa, if you want to open up the mics. I don't know if Bob and Armando have any questions here for us.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Armando.
Good morning.
Do we have to do any kind of installation on the mainframe? Any software?
Yeah, we are running a server on the mainframe. The installation is a straightforward process. It's essentially a large jar file. It does run under the Java virtual machine. Where our documentation on our website completely walks through the install process. It's a very straightforward process. We have had customers who have received the software and installed it completely without contacting us for any help. So it's pretty straightforward.
Any started task that we have to start?
It can run as a started task. Yes.
Started task.
Yep.
Okay. What's the consumption of this started task?
Well, of course, that will depend on your data usage. Good point to bring up. We actually, our pricing is actually, Dustin can talk about this in more detail, but our pricing is based on the amount of data that's transferred, and the consumption will be directly correlated to the amount of data that you're moving through it.
Okay, then it depends on the amount of data that we exchange with the cloud.
Correct.
Yeah, we don't charge. You can install it in as many LPARs as you want, as many CACs as you want. That doesn't affect the charge at all. We just look at the amount of data that's going through Lozen. And again, in the most optimal situation, right, you're accessing individual records from an application. In the true ETL, where you're moving maybe large files daily, multiple times a day, weekly, whatever that is, we'll make sure that we price that so it's extremely cost effective to the customer.
Okay, then if I understand, if I understand well, is that the charge is for the amount of data.
Correct.
Okay. No matter if I install it in 10 LPARs.
Yep. We don't care how many LPARs. The connectors, if the customer needs a connector, that's just a flat rate per year, regardless of amount of data. That's really just to make sure that we can support those connectors and those customers properly. So that's just a flat rate of $50,000 per year. And that number I quoted, where we're kind of pricing out other customer solutions in that 200 to 250. The biggest variable is whether they include a connector or two in that.
Okay.
So I'd point out one other thing is that, we're seeing about a 40% efficiency benefit by running under Java 11 as well. So that's important if that's a consideration for the customer. So whether that's on the zip engine or on the GP engine, we see much better performance with that Java 11 from a resource consumption standpoint.
And does that test need any special authorizations, such as APF authorized?
No, I don't think it is, because it is running as under the Java VM. Vince, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, so with ZOS, there are a number of things, especially in the security realm, that require APF authorization.
Right.
Anytime we do any of that, it's segregated into a completely separate component that's installed automatically when the Java implementation starts up. So there is one small executable that requires authorization that gets loaded automatically when Lozen starts up, and then anything that requires any special type of privileges is routed through that component, so that your entire JVM isn't running authorized, which would be security eye opener to a lot of customers.
Yeah, that was my concern, Vince. Thank you. And also in monitoring the amount of data being transferred, how do you get that that information back to your charging system?
So it cuts an S. Yeah, go ahead, Vince.
Well, yeah, I was going to explain that we do interval-based SMF recording, and in the SMF records we include the total amount of data read and written, and there's actually quite a few statistics about what we've done in the interval. So the data is there. Today we don't necessarily do audits and true ups and that sort of thing to process that data, but it is there for the customer to report on it. And Dustin can explain the contractual side of it, which is really where the rubber meets the road.
Sure. Well, on the reporting then, since it gets an SMF record, does the customer simply extract those SMF records and send the information to yourselves for the charge, or do you have a tool that pulls that SMF data and creates a report?
We don't require that, to be clear.
Okay.
This is handled purely by the contractual terms. We're providing the SMF data as a convenience to the customer if they would like to audit it, but we don't require any audit or true up or reporting back to us.
Perfect. Thanks for the explanation.
Yep.
Yeah, let me just clarify a little bit, Bob. So as part of the renewal process, we may ask for that information, but that is not to do a true up or backwards looking. It's really forward looking.
Yep.
And you can kind of see how those, we publish our license agreement right on our website as well. And you can kind of see how that mechanism works. Now, for some reason, the customer was, it was a one-time deal and a one-time shot, then there is kind of a true up aspect to it. But for continuing customers, it's really not meant to be punitive in any way. It's meant to just be forward looking to make sure we have things sized right, priced right. And again, I think we're very flexible on that. We want to make sure that this is definitely a self-funding solution for the customer.
Sure. Perfect. Thanks for the explanation. And last question I had, I did look through your website, and first of all, congratulations. This is a great presentation. I love the level of detail provided and the overview of the technology, which is great. I know that this has only been out for a short period of time. But I did look at your website. I didn't find any customer references at all. Is that something that you're pursuing and will have available soon?
Yeah, so we're under NDA with every one of those customers. There is a building pipeline for sure. We have partner references that have tested Lozen that are available if needed and that have done extensive testing. So I think those are the best resources at the moment. Obviously, we are in conversations with the customers about doing some other kind of public use cases or shared presentations as well.
Or even, once you do get a production customer, doing a generic case study or a use case where the customer's name is not provided, does help eliminate some of the concerns that other customers might have.
Yeah, we'll certainly have genericized ones, and you can also see in our materials and some of the things we've talked about already about some of those use cases genericized, right? Even though we're not naming customers or their specific uses.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep. All right. Any other questions before we close?
Not for my side.
And not for me. Thanks again. This has been great.
Yeah, again, thank you for
thanks
joining
us.
Yeah, we have many resources out there. I know, Bob, you've seen some of those, blogs, video demos, past webinars as well. If you'd like a deeper dive, please reach out to us. You can see that on the screen or email hello@virtualzcomputing.com. Also, we have a couple other webinars here in our December series and invite you to join us for those.
Perfect. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.